Sonic's 35th anniversary has been rolling out with a lot of surprises and absolutely amazing walks down memory lane. We've had decade spotlights, more DLC and collab rollouts for Crossworlds, and so many other things coming through to celebrate the Blue Blur. That being said, color me surprised when Sonic Team announced an audio drama in the form of a podcast as a part of Sonic's 35th anniversary celebration this year. Let's take a look at the story and world building of the Chaotix Casefiles. Hello YouTube, I am the StarChild and welcome to Tentai Kansoku. It's been a hot minute, but I am back with a new direction of sorts, narrative analysis, which is something I was planning on anyway, but now it's going to be the focus of the channel. If you've been on the internet for a long time, or even just in the fandom space in general, you've probably at least heard of the term audio drama. They're very common with Japanese media, specifically in their homeland, as a form of supplemental media or even fan service in some cases. They feature a deeper look into the lives of beloved characters and put them in scenarios that might not fully fit into the flow of the main story. The Chaotix Casefiles, like I mentioned, is an audio drama featuring Team Chaotix, aka the Chaotix Detective Agency, on their latest case, tracking down some mysterious relics called the astroscopic lenses. The series was written by comic book writer Dan Jolly in his first SEGA credit, if I'm not mistaken. Familiar faces Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley added in some contributions to the writing as well, both of whom write for both the game-related things like social media animations and the games themselves in Ian's case, as well as the IDW comics. The series was directed by Ian Jones-Quartey, which is a big surprise. He's most well known for his work on Steven Universe as well as his own show OKKO, which, fun fact, Sonic was featured on an episode of back in 2019. Speaking of Steven Universe, the creator of that show and Ian JQ's wife Rebecca Sugar wrote the banger of a theme song called The Chaotix Are on the Case, which was performed by Tiffany Mann and the 8-Bit Band. Rebecca is no stranger to writing amazing music going all the way back to her Adventure Time days. These two are a power couple if I've ever seen one. Seriously, every time they come together on something, even if they're working on two completely different aspects of that thing, it just turns to gold. And can we also just take a second to appreciate the sheer amount of talent that came out of like the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack family of shows? Like Adventure Time specifically, now that I'm thinking about it, like everybody that was connected to either of those two things just went on to greatness. Anyway, onto the story itself. The series is technically 11 episodes long, with the prologue being listed as episode 0, and it sets the stage. The Chaotix, as usual, are chasing their next hustle when they catch wind of a museum robbery in the area and they go check it out. The interesting thing about this story is that it takes place most of the time in a cell. At the beginning, we find out that Sonic and Vector have already been captured by Eggman, and Eggman and Sonic are listening to Vector recount the events of what led everybody to this situation. I'm not going to spoil too much that the internet hasn't already, because this is definitely worth a listen if you haven't, so I'm just going to do a light summary. The story begins with the Chaotix checking out that local museum heist, like I said, after catching wind of the robbery. They end up being hired by this mysterious newer human character, Professor Victoria, after being referred to them by Tails, in order to track down these astroscopic lenses so they can be returned to the museum collection. Apparently they're connected to ancient Gaian civilization and have some sort of power amplification ability, making them both architecturally valuable and dangerous. The case leads the three on a wild goose chase around both the human continent and the Anthro Islands, as the thief is revealed to be a shapeshifter who has been framing multiple different characters to throw the Chaotix off. Eventually, the case leads them to an Eggman base where it picks up where it all started off, with Sonic and Vector being captured by Eggman, and the final battle of the story commences with everyone coming together to take on the ultimate threat and the true villain of the story as it presents the return of Infinite the Jackal. I absolutely adored this thing. It is such a treat for the 35th anniversary. The voice acting is amazing, and everyone's improved so much, and the direction was perfect for everybody. I really hope that they move forward with just the way everyone was in this, and the way that they sounded. The two I really want to spotlight here are Sonic and Rouge. The tone for Sonic is perfect in this. We all know Roger has done various different pitches and tones for Sonic, from that more nasally, goofy, higher-pitched voice from the beginning of when he started, to like that deeper frontier voice. I think this in-between thing that they've been doing is perfect for him. This might be my adventure bias, but Ryan Drummond, Sonic's original voice actor, always had kind of more of like a I guess, a deeper tone for Sonic, and even Jason Griffith had a deeper tone than Roger was doing for a while. And I think the Frontiers one was just too deep. But yeah, like, I think whatever this is the sweet spot, and I hope they keep the direction here. Same with Rouge. Now, I've always thought that Karen Strassman had a good voice for Rouge. I never liked Kathleen Delaney's, like, God, everyone still to this day makes those 40-year-old smoker jokes. You know, like, that's what she sounded like, that Dr. Girlfriend thing they had her doing. It was way too old for her, and I think that 4Kids even said that they didn't know how old the character was supposed to be. But I always thought Karen had a voice whose vibe was just the same as Lonnie Manella's and Ochiai Rumi, which is her Japanese voice actress. And it just, like, the direction that they were giving her for this character for so long was awful. Like, they either had her sounding like somebody's grandmother or a Valley Girl, which neither of the two are Rouge. But this is the first time she has genuinely sounded like Rouge should sound to me. Even in the way that she spoke, like the words she used and the way that she talked. It was definitely more like this mature but still young person, which is something I'll talk a little bit about later on when it comes to the ages of the characters. But, like, yeah, this is what she needs to sound like. This is how she needs to speak. That's more of a writing thing, but the voice direction, they did her so well here. The sound design is amazing as well. Like, they did they did a reference to that Sonic X saxophone thing every time Rouge showed up. There was also a lot of musical references and motifs for various characters. I really liked that, like, jazz riff of Eggman's theme song. It was so, like, I don't know, it just fit so well and it sounded great. The music really set the mood as well. Like, it elevated moments of tension, it softened downtime moments, the whole shebang. And obviously, that's a very important thing for something that is strictly an audio media. The only real issue I had was the action scenes. Now, they weren't bad at all, but the final battle really ended up sounding too chaotic and messy for me, and I think that had to do with the sheer amount of characters that were involved. I think it was the Chaotix, all three Chaotix, Sonic, Tails, as well as Tangle and Whisper, who I'll talk about later, and then Infinite. And on top of that, there were all these clones and illusions of everybody that he had created. So they had to create, like, this almost literally a Deus Ex Machina from this scene in the form of Tails inventing a machine right on the spot that distorts the clone voices so they can differentiate who's who, for the audience as well as the characters. There's also this, like, over-explained thing that they do in the same vein as, like, a detective show back in the day, where they describe everything in detail, and it might come off a little exposition-y for people who have been a fan of this franchise for a long time. Other than that, the writing was amazing. Honestly, the writing is why I wanted to make this video. I don't think anybody was really out of character here at all, though I do have a theory about Rouge that I'll talk about later on, but I really loved how everyone was portrayed in this. If you're familiar with my videos, the most popular ones are me talking about characterization, and I have to say that I was very happy with that in this sense. I love the combinations too. Like, we have characters that we haven't really focused on in ages, and characters interacting with each other that don't usually interact, or that we don't see interact too much. And honestly, I think this type of thing is a really good idea to do on occasion, and just to give certain characters more attention. As a fan since the 90s, the cast of characters has just kind of exploded over the years, and there are admittedly way too many characters to truly give everyone the spotlight, especially if they have interesting backstories or interesting concepts. People talking about Silver and Blaze, haven't seen them really active in a long ass time. I mentioned this in a past video, but in the early 2000s, the main cast was basically everybody from Sonic Adventure 2 and Cream the Rabbit, with that group being like the main focus of most of the games at that time, and even Sonic X. So that eventually got downsized when the games kind of moved to focusing just on Sonic. So there are a lot of characters that we haven't seen in a long time, who a lot of people are probably used to being around all the time. The Chaotix in particular are actually classic characters, first debuting in the spin-off game Knuckles Chaotix, and then they were reintroduced in Sonic Heroes. They are probably the most commonly reoccurring secondary characters, like outside of that initial group of, 8? This is the first first time outside of the comics that I think these three have gotten a lot of development since Sonic Heroes. And I love how they were written. There's something that I noticed with Espio in Crossworlds. I do want to preface this by, I know that SEGA removed the characters' ages from Sonic Channel. I still see them as young people, and I still see them with the ages that they were given in Sonic Heroes, or at least like around that age, maybe a little older, but they're not adults to me. Vector at that time was actually the oldest character, and he was listed as only being 20. So it makes the most sense for me, at least, for them to be that young. And I'll talk about that a little later with Vector. Essentially, like, I don't think this would work if he was older than that. But anyway, I like that Espio was written as being a little insecure about himself. It's not something we really see with this cast of characters at all. Everyone is very confident in themselves, but having this like realistic view from a teenage boy, it's normal for him to be a little worried about himself in this sense, especially since he is surrounded by all these other characters with amazing skills for him to compare himself to. And being a ninja requires a lot of discipline, so him questioning whether or not he really lives up to that is interesting and refreshing in the sense of a character arc for him. Charmy is also kind of going through this in a way. It's a little less insecurity in my opinion, and more so him just being the youngest and not really knowing what his role in the team even is yet. And I'm gonna be honest, Charmy was always my favorite Chaotix, which is funny because he seems to be canonically annoying. But I just think he's so freaking cute, and he's always so happy to see everybody, and he thinks everyone's cool, and he looks up to everyone. I can't really get mad at him, no matter how hyper or like foul-mouthed in some senses that he might be. He's just really endearing to me. He ends up showing both himself and the audience that he can be a wild card, but he's also a quick thinker and ends up making pretty big contributions by the end of this. Vector. I love Vector in this, and I like how it puts a spotlight on like how serious and unserious he is. Vector is really the one that made me appreciate the way everyone is written, because like I said, while he is technically one of the few adult characters, he's not an entire grown-ass man yet. He is still very young, and they perfectly captured this with his personality, the decisions he makes, and just these quirks that he has. The way he is would not work if he was like a 30-year-old man. Like I said before, I don't think anything about Vector would work if he was not a very, very young adult. And I have to bring up like that cliche noir film voice that he does the whole time. He does it because he's trying to sound cool and serious, which is a very young person thing to do. The funniest thing is that all the other characters can hear him doing this. Some of them even call it out, meaning like it's not an effect or anything for the audio drama itself. He's literally doing it in real life in the story. I think Charmy calls it out twice and Sonic once. And honestly too, this shows how great of an actor Keith Silverstein is, because doing a character's voice is one thing, but doing a voice and then having that character do a voice is so difficult, but he pulled it off. And what I mean by that is he sounded like Vector was doing a voice and not Keith doing a different voice and saying it was Vector. You know what I mean? Like having him be Vector who was also doing a voice, it really just shows his talent. There's also this moment in episode 5, I think, where Vector starts to like exaggerate and fictionalize the story a little bit, mainly when it comes to his interactions with Vanilla the Rabbit. So back in Sonic X, he had a crush on her, but it seems like they decided to run with that and make it canon. This is also a very young man thing to have a crush on an older woman. My favorite thing here is that he's really sitting here having this whole conversation and like imagining how the interaction went when they were alone, making it super romantic, and like she's really into him. And then Sonic and Eggman even interrupt him multiple times, and they're just like, nah, big dog, I really don't think that's how that happened. This is the first time in a while we really get a deep peek into the way these guys work together as well. Like, the crazy thing is the detective thing, not making money, seems to portray it as like a pipe dream of some sorts, but Vector is actually really good at what he does. Just like in Heroes, he figures out what's actually going on before everyone else does. He just kind of seems to be a bit of a doormat who either lets it slide when people don't actually pay them, or he and the others decide to put saving the world over getting paid in most cases anyway. Looking at you, Eggman, at the end of Heroes. The Chaotix whole thing is that they're broke as hell. And it's not like they're particularly money hungry either. They legit just need it for like daily life shit. Like, we need to pay rent and we need to buy groceries, which is hilarious. And going into the thing I was saying about Espio having this realistic view of himself is because Vector, by extension, and the team's entire motivations are just very real world problems in this world of extraordinary people and events. Seeing them in action really puts the spotlight on how well these three complement each other, how well they work together, and also how they are actually really competent in their job, despite technically being comic relief characters who both people in universe and real life don't really take seriously. They all contribute something special and are important to the group, which really deepens their bond and makes their loyalty to one another very believable. I do want to mention Knuckles, even though he wasn't really in there that much since they debuted in his spin-off game. This is Knuckles. This reminded me so much of Adventure era Knuckles. I was blown away, even though he was literally in there for like 2 minutes. He might be a little bit gullible. He might have been gullible in the past, but that was more because of his social skills that he didn't have. He does have those now. Even then, he's still abrasive and duty-bound. This right here is Knuckles the Echidna. Please keep this personality for him moving forward. This is real. This is right. Vanilla and Gemerl finally get voices. These two characters were pretty tied to the Sonic Advance games, if you didn't know that. She was in 2 and he was in 3, so it's nice to see them get some kind of feature for something else. Vanilla, of course, like I said, is Cream's mother, and she debuted alongside her in Sonic Advance 2. Her voice is perfect. Jenny Yokobori did like a great job bringing her to life. I did see some people wanting her to sound younger for some reason. Like, she should have a squeaky child voice like Cream does. I think that's so they can ship her with Vector and not have an age gap. We don't know how old Vanilla is, but like, she has an entire child and she is obviously meant to be a mature woman. Cream and Charmy are both like 6 years old, so this woman is not in the same age group as the other characters, and it's kind of obvious. Gemerl's voice is amazing. Alejandro Saab does both him and Infinite in this. I really love how Gemerl's voice is a lot less robotic than the other Eggman robots we've been close to. For those who don't know, Gemerl is Eggman's version of Emerald, who is a character from Sonic Battle, and there's a whole story behind that, but Gemerl was a threat in Sonic Advance 3, but Tails managed to reprogram him, and now he lives with Cream and Vanilla as like a guardian of sorts. But yeah, his voice is very pleasant, and I honestly didn't know what to expect from him because we never heard Emerald speak. Even though there were little voice clips in Sonic Battle. So I didn't know what Gemerl was even gonna sound like, but this was an excellent casting choice. Tangle and Whisper also get voices for the first time. These two are IDW characters and have been in the spotlight a lot recently with their addition to Crossworlds, and now they're playing a pretty major role in this story. Now, I've said this before, but I don't read the comics, I just can't get into them. So everything I know about these two is just from me Googling it. But I will say that the voices and performances fit them very well, like perfectly even from what I do know. I have talked about the importance of character design specifically in my Rouge video, and these two are shining examples of what I was getting at. As someone who doesn't know them, I can really just look at the girls and figure out everything that I need to know about their personalities and potential role in the universe. Tangle is very slim and athletically built. She wears sporty clothes, sneakers, fingerless gloves, nothing loose-fitting or flowing. This gives her an aerodynamic look and implies that she is an active character. Even her hairstyle, which I know Sonic characters have extremely stylized hair, but you can tell that she would either have an extremely short bob or even a pixie cut, which also gives that sporty look because it's not too fancy or anything that would get in the way. All of these things give her like a tomboyish vibe, which gives a lot of ideas of what role she can play in a story. Also, the posing that they choose for her gives a look into her personality. She's always portrayed with a smile on her face, with this dynamic or energetic pose, that type of stuff. Because of that, I think Ashlyn Madden brought the perfect voice for her. She sounds exactly like I'd expect her to. Whisper is the exact opposite of her girlfriend, and yeah, apparently these two are heavily implied to be a couple, despite whatever censorship roadblock is in place. Looking at the two, their designs are actually quite complementary to one another. Tangle has this like gray and white fur with bright orange accents on her clothing. Whisper is the opposite, with like this pale gold for her fur and completely muted and mainly monochromatic coloration for her more bulky tactical clothing. She has a lot of gear, which implies that she's a more serious and battle-ready character. She also follows the eyes always shut trope, which if you've ever seen anime, there's probably always at least one of these characters that shows up at some point. The trope is usually but not always reserved for characters that are hiding something or just characters that are more reserved, which Whisper seems to be the latter of. Either way, it always comes with these people only really opening their eyes if some shit is about to go down or something extremely emotional is happening, which I've seen panels from the comics of that also being true. Like her name suggests, she not only uses wisps in her weapon but also whispers when she talks, which again is perfectly captured by her voice actor, Iris Quiñones. Now, I do want to talk about this for a second. In the past, I've talked about the issues that I felt would arise in making the IDW comics canon to the games. I know this is a volatile topic. My issues were genuinely narrative and creative concerns, which I've seen unfolding in real time. The comics, from what I understand, were not initially intended to be canon, so characters that were introduced or created for it weren't really designed to have any kind of like background relevant to the game events. Even though it popped off with Forces, I guess that's the only exception to the rule, since the comic and certain characters' development is so closely tied to the events of that game. I think Evan Stanley came out not too long ago and said that she has been directed by SEGA to make shorter, less in-depth arcs, more shallow storytelling, which I think was something I predicted in my Amy video a while ago, but it just removes this creative freedom and ideas that could have been explored in this supplemental media if it wasn't so tied to the games. The introduction of Tangle and Whisper presented another issue that I predicted as well. There was never going to be a clean way to introduce these characters. They did add in a lot of exposition to kind of explain who they are and what their skills and powers are, but it was still quite literally like Vector just saying, hey look, it's our friends that we've been on various adventures with and that we're totally here the whole time, right guys? Like, it would be the same to me as if they were like, hey look, it's Sonic's parents, and then Tom and Maddie from the movie showed up. There's no good way to really introduce these characters that were not supposed to be canon in the first place without presenting an issue of like the plot and the story of the Sonic universe now being split between these two different types of media. Like, you can't really get the full picture unless you consume both of them. Now, before anyone says that it doesn't matter because they've only been in spin-off stuff, they're gonna be in the next game. Like, they are going to be in the next game. I feel like anyone who can't see that at this point is delusional. Do you really think that SEGA would go through the trouble of creating and rigging 3D models as well as those 2D VTuber models for the Tales Tube episode that they were in, hiring voice actors who were, by the way, spotlighted on the YouTube channel just for a side project in Crossworlds? No, they're going to be in the next game. If it's not the next game, they're going to be in a game. It's obvious at this point. So, moving on. I also wanted to talk about Shadow for a second, mainly because he ain't in this. Not even mentioned. Now, some people are getting tired of Shadow showing up all the time because his year ended, but it doesn't really bother me because, like I mentioned before, as an old fan, he was a main character, and it's kind of turning back to how it was in the early 2000s to a certain extent, with Shadow being part of the main cast, especially after he came back in Heroes, and I've mainly seen this in Branding. But anyway, it's funny to me that he's not here because he is the entire reason for Infinite's villain arc in the first place. If memory serves, in Forces, Shadow murked Infinite's entire squad and was the one to scar up his face and tell him that he's weak and useless, which all of that and being mocked is what sent dude off the deep end. It's very in character for Shadow, actually, to just not be involved. Considering that he straight up just forgot who Infinite was after doing all that stuff in Forces. Like, this entire thing is so insignificant to him, even though he kind of led to this happening. Now this leads me to Rouge. Or does it? Because I have a theory that I'll get to in a second, but I just want to mention that I love seeing Rouge by herself. Because there are so many characters now, a lot of them tend to be paired off with someone else or in a team, and they don't really get to shine on their own, despite having the skills and personality and backstory to do so. Rouge kind of ended up being pushed into this in a way with her association with Team Dark. Like I said, with Shadow, both of them were part of the main cast. They debuted in the same game. You know, this is why they were everywhere in every game and in Sonic X until the game started focusing on Sonic, like I mentioned earlier. So I think reestablishing her as a character who can very much function on her own is pertinent to develop her as a character as well as the other members of her team. I genuinely think that Rouge was never in this, or at least not in the entire thing. Hear me out. So Rouge is my favorite character, and she has been since Sonic Adventure 2, so I think I know her pretty well at this point. I will say that some writers tend to lean way too heavily into the flirty aspect of her character without really understanding why she does it or what it is. She's not some love-struck little girl by any means. She's not like a hoe. The flirting is a tool to disarm, distract people, or even get information out of them. Now, I mean, we haven't really seen her flirt with anyone genuinely. I have a headcanon of sorts that has nothing to do with this, but I feel like she's one of those people that can dish it out, but she can't really take it herself. Like if someone flirted with her, it would throw her off a little bit, or if someone leaned really into what she was saying, I feel like it would freak her out. This is solely based on that interaction she got with Knuckles in Adventure 2 when he saved her after their fight and they had like a moment. She got a little softer. But here, it seems like she's just straight up down bad for Espio the whole time. She keeps trying to get him to run off with her, and she never really talks to anyone else until the end, actually. I just thought about that. No one even sees her, I think. Every time somebody else shows up, she disappears. She's constantly flirting with him and seemingly gets annoyed when he's too dense to understand what's going on. She says something at the end too. It's like, you had the chance to know how good I could have been to you or something. Like, she's not the type to do that, you know? She's not the type to be thrown off by someone not falling for it. That's really the part of the reason that she works so well with some of the other characters. Like Shadow doesn't fall for it, he ignores her when she acts like that. Knuckles brushes her off, and Sonic just matches her energy. So it's not like this is the first time she's met someone who didn't fall for her feminine wiles. This could very much be an IDW thing that I have no frame of reference for, but I don't ever remember her having a thing for Espio as far as I know. So my theory is that she was actually infinite most of, if not the entire time. Now you might be thinking, the voice distortion thing that Tails made proved that she was real. Did it though? Like, Infinite and the Phantom Ruby had the ability to create these clones with other characters, same with the lenses, but yeah, the original Infinite's not a clone, he was just disguising himself to frame other people, so it's quite possible that he was disguised as Rouge the whole time, and used that as a way to either get information or slip away at the end, or maybe even just to distract Espio, I don't know. We never really see the two interact, if memory serves. I don't even think they were in the same place at the same time, now that I'm thinking about it. Actually, the only time Rouge seems to meet up with anyone other than Espio is at the end when he and Charmy had the lenses, and then she quickly leaves after they get destroyed, which you could also say, yeah, like maybe she just didn't have anything to steal at that point, but I don't think that's what happened. Now, if this is Rouge, it's a little out of character because she doesn't really seem to be here for a reason, and also, like I said, I can't understand why she would be so heavily flirting with Espio. So when I was younger, and actually up until recently, because I don't know why I didn't realize this, but I used to think she was a gun agent, like so high up in the ranks. But I realized that she was working for the president the whole time and investigating Gun in Sonic Adventure 2, and then she started working with Gun after that. But I think she is the president's personal agent. Like he's the one that she ultimately answers to, despite whatever job that she's on. I don't think she didn't steal the lenses, you know what I mean? And it doesn't seem like she was really gathering intel either. So unless she was, and then they just got destroyed and it didn't matter. But like I mentioned, the Espio thing is just really out of left field. But at the same time, if it was Infinite, why is he going after Espio so hard? I'm gonna go ahead and assume that he was just trying to break up the team because Espio has skill, but he's insecure, so theoretically he would be the weakest link. You would think that would be Charmy, but like I said before, Charmy's just a kid trying to find his place. He's not particularly insecure. Also, he's more heavily protected by Vector, and Espio is the one that was always going off on his own to do his stealth thing. So, like, he'd be the one that's out in the open and an easier target, I suppose. I don't know, but as I mentioned, this thing ended with room for a sequel, so maybe we'll find out later at some point. Lastly, the world building got so much TLC from this little thing. We got a big return of human characters who aren't Robotniks. I do want to talk about Professor Victoria for a second. It's so funny to me that people just forgot about her after she was revealed. Despite the big deal they made about this character for years, I'm pretty sure she was just an unused asset character. For those who don't know the story behind her, she was featured in, I think it was the first episode of Tales Tube? I don't know, but it was the one where he's talking about the world and how humans live on the continents and the animal people live on the islands. And her character was shown with the Sonic Unleashed characters, and people were like, who's that? That's not a real person. Like, she wasn't in that game. And then for some reason it became a big conspiracy theory, and she was featured in like Sonic 3 in the background and teased in Tales Tube until she debuted in Tales Tube. And that happened for years, and I don't think she was supposed to be a real character. I think that was just an unused asset concept art thing, and people were so obsessed with her that they decided to make her a real character, and now people forgot about her after she was revealed. I even saw people thinking that that silhouette on like the second cover was Maria for some reason. They look nothing alike. We also have her working with Gun, which is implied in Shadow Generations and Gerald's Journal, which people like forgot about also. She doesn't seem to be a Robotnik because Eggman doesn't seem to know who she is, or really care about her for that matter, which you would think like maybe he doesn't know his family, but the way that he wrote about them in his journals in Sonic Frontiers, I feel like he does. There was also that thing that they posted where he did like a video about Shadow during the Year of Shadow where he mentioned Maria, and he said something like he didn't really know her, but the loss is something that he took personally. So he has a lot of pride in being a Robotnik and his family, even if he's not in contact with them. So I feel like he would know if she was related to him in some way. I think it's cool to have another character who isn't really tied to the Robotnik lore, because even Commander Abraham Tower is tied to the Robotnik lore because he grew up on the Ark. She is a very interesting person. I can't really figure out what her deal is because she seems to actually be an archaeologist, but also that she's working for Gun. But why is she working for Gun? We don't know. Unless she is a Robotnik, that would explain why she has some ties to Abe at least. Anyway, I think integrating the humans back into the stories in the world of Sonic really brings it back to life. We know that the Anthro characters and the human characters all live on the same planet and have interacted in the past. Having the characters move through this like colorful world filled with crazy nature on the islands and then going to the more industrial but peaceful human towns and cities makes this world feel whole. Especially since, as we've seen in both adventure games, the humans know who Sonic and his friends are. Amy straight up lived in Station Square for a time and everyone knew who she was if you take the time to talk to the NPCs in that game. And we have some characters like Shadow and Rouge and seemingly the Chaotix even who work with humans and they're more directly associated with humans in their day-to-day lives. And there are countries like the United Federation, or I think maybe it's a continent, I don't know. But it seems to be a place where every species comes and lives together. So bringing it back is just nice. And it's like the world that they've built over time is finally, coming back in a way. Radio or audio dramas have been a pretty popular thing in Japan since the 1920s, so I'm glad Sonic Team decided to finally release something like this. The reception has been pretty positive from what I've seen, so hopefully this will not be the last one. In the Japanese side of things, there are a variety of side stories that give fans a deeper look into Sonic's world. A lot of you have probably seen like the calendar pictures, or like that, I forget what it's called, but it's like the Sonic Team monthly calendar thing that has characters featured doing random everyday stuff. and, you know, getting a glimpse into what their life is like when they're not going on adventures. So maybe the positive reception to this will lead them to bring that kind of stuff over to the Western fans as well. Or maybe we'll get more audio dramas. Like I said, this was definitely open-ended and left room for a sequel or a continuation. I think that this is the best way to give those characters we haven't seen in a while or seen much of a chance to shine, as well as bringing more interactions between characters that we haven't really seen interact before or in a while. They've done stuff like that with Tails Tube on occasion, but I really think we need something more in depth like this was. And I think that's where I'll leave this one. Please go and listen to the Chaotix Casefiles if you haven't already. It's only about 4 hours long, with each episode being like 20 to 25 minutes. It is an amazing listen. I really enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this video, then let me know with a like and a comment. Subscribe if you want to come on this journey with us. I'll be here unraveling the cosmos one story at a time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Give us your mystery you wouldn't want to miss when the chaotic